Welcome to Coaching in Session, where limits end and growth begins.
Hosted by Michael Rearden.
This is your space to challenge the ordinary,
Unlock your potential,
and step boldly into your next chapter.
Your mindset journey continues.
Welcome, Brian DesRoches, to Coaching in Session. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well, and Michael, really looking forward to this.
Of course, I'm looking forward to this as well because the topic or the conversation we're going to have is something near and dear to my heart. It's not essentially mindset, but it's about the brain. And I remember when I probably was in college and I was really trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And I was still in education. I was doing all these wonderful things. But one of the things I loved to do was to learn about the mind. And today we're going to be having you on as a psychotherapist. We're going to be learning about the mind. We're going to be learning about where the mind is in our world today. And there's so many problems. And of course, with problems, there can be solutions as well. And we're going to be diving into that and all just in a moment. But if you could, can you tell the world who you are, what you do, and of course, how you help?
Sure. Thank you. Brian DesRoches. I live in Seattle, Washington. I am a psychotherapist and a coach. My coaching is predominantly with the dental profession globally, which I really enjoy a lot. I have a lot of degrees and a lot of training and all that kind of stuff. I just so enjoy learning. I delight in my curiosity, and I delight when others like yourself are curious about how do we change? How do we really create enduring transformation as individuals? Whether you're a coach, or you're a psychotherapist, or you're a psychoanalyst, even if you're a manager in a business, how do you help people? Those questions really do involve the mind, they involve the brain, they involve memory to a great degree, and they involve our third level of learning, which very few people know about.
We're going to get into that, hopefully that third level, so more people know about it. One of the things you brought up was change. Now, I'm sure change can be one of those daunting things for many people. Change, oh man, I have to change who I am, identity, location, job, career. It could be scary for individuals to want to change. Now, something happens though to some people, and it happens with women a lot. I don't know why. Is that they have a guy or something they might like, and they say, "Oh, like this guy is so cool," and but he does this. I want to change him. And this happens to guys also. Guys do this too. Oh, she doesn't like me. Maybe I can change her. And so this idea of change, is change something that someone can influence upon someone else? Or is it up to the individual to say, I want to change?
I'm going to say both, because we live in what could be called fields of influence. Even you and I are, we're 2,000 miles apart probably, but our interaction, your facial features, mine, we're influencing each other. One could call it quantum entanglement. I'm not going to use those fancy words, but there's a process called emotional influence. And an influence is from the Latin word influare. It means a power or an energy that flowed down from the constellations. 8th century, this power energy flowed down from the stars and the constellations and affected the character and destiny of people. My emotional state and how I am with you influences you. You cannot escape that. And your state influences me. It's the right hemisphere and it's processed the nervous system called neuroception. So if I want to change you, first of all, I'm not able to do that because the moment I push on you, you're going to push back. That's Newton's 3 laws of motion. It just is the way it is. However, if I become curious and I start to ask questions about you and what would you like to be different in? If I tell you my experience, sometimes this is what's happening for me, and I'm curious what happens for you when I'm kind of distressed. And if I start asking curious questions that are self-referenced, this is what I'm thinking, this is what I'm feeling, not just feeling all the time. A lot of people just, this is what I'm feeling, this is what I'm feeling. That's great, but tell me what you're thinking when you're feeling that. I want to know the story with the feeling. By engaging in that kind of what I call transformational listening and communication or self-referencing communication, the probability that I positively influence you, not manipulate, because it's impossible to do that in that positive state. Anybody who manipulates is in a negative state. But if I'm in a positive state and I become curious, we're engaging in something, I'm present to you, I want to understand you more, then I'm going to positively influence you. And in that sense, the probability that you may want to look further into yourself in relation with me increases. And the probabilities are all we're talking about. In human relationship, it's all probabilities. And I want to put the probabilities on my side when I'm talking to my adult children, my wife, my friends, you. And the way I do that is I'd be in a positive state myself. How do I want to experience myself with you versus how do I want you to experience yourself with me? That doesn't work very well. I know that's kind of there's skills there, but it's an internal management process that is so important. And memory plays a big role.
Yeah, there's a lot to dissect there, and I'm going to do my best. I'm going to do my best to get as much as that as possible because it is profound. And one of the things that really stuck to me was the word manipulate, right? My brain is just, again, naturally, we are negative, right? If we see something in the bush, uh-oh, what's in the bush is going to come out and get me, right? It has
Survival
kept us
bias
alive.
brain. Yep.
Right. It has kept us alive, right? But we live in a very plush world today. We live in our homes and we have our cars, our vehicles. We can go to the grocery store to get our foods and procure our goods. So we don't necessarily have to deal with a lot of the basic necessities. Not saying that there aren't people in the world who are not as fortunate as we are, but I can almost guarantee if you're listening to the podcast, you are in a good situation, right? You have electricity, you have internet access where you can listen to the show, and you are probably in a place where you can say, compared to other people in the world, you are well off. Now, when I say all of this, right, we look at the negative, right, the word manipulate, where people would feel as if they're being controlled. They would feel as if their ideas are not truly theirs. We can even go back to the inception of schooling, right, elementary school, and how we are given a perception of thoughts or ideas, and we will proceed with those as we grow. And then, even as our parents are, they say what 60 or 80% of children who are growing up with a Democratic parent will be Democrats, Republicans, vice versa, same thing. And it's because they're seeing that, they're living with it, and they're saying, well, this is the norm for me. This is what my parents do. This is what I should be doing. My dad's a police officer. I guess I need to be a police officer. So we have these ideas of maybe a soft form of manipulation where things are happening behind the scenes where we're not truly paying attention or giving our focus to what's happening in our life. And when someone doesn't truly focus on what they would like or what they need to be dealing with, because every individual is going to be unique, yet we live in a cookie cutter world where we say that this is going to be a good fit for everyone. If you are depressed, you must need some antidepressants. If you are hyperactive, then you must have ADHD or something along these lines. So we categorize people so often versus truly getting to understand an individual. Why would you say that we live in a world where this manipulation or this idea that people can be categorized even though we're so vastly different through our DNA?
That process of categorization, if you will, begins very early when the brain learns how to differentiate a chair from a tree, a mommy from a daddy, a car from a wheel, a good person from a bad person by learning. And that early learning, first 7 years, when a child is like a sponge, and it's the brain takes in this information. And because of the survival bias we talked about earlier, the brain is a survival bias process. It learns, it predicts, and adapts in order to say, just want you to be here tomorrow. It could care less if you're happy. It's not a happy-fying process. It's a surviving process. So it learns early in life what I call the adaptive self, not the ego. People call it that. It's got a bad rep. We adapt. We develop a self that is the adaptive self. And part of that development is the brain starts to categorize things. Those people are bad. Those people are good. Those people are frightening. Those people are wonderful. That religion is the best. That religion is no good. We learn these things sometimes intentionally, oftentimes And we don't know we're learning it when we're young. We don't know we're learning it. It's not like when I was 3 years old, my dad taught me, boy, oh boy, you got to stay away from that kind of person right there. But I learned some things about who I had to stay away from because it was subtle, but it was part of this process. This is what Jung calls the stamping process. The family and the culture stamp. And we adapt to our world to survive. That adaptive self literally operates all the time. And it's a protective self. So we categorize, or the brain. See, when we say I. My brain is the thing that learns, and I'm not my brain. I'm not my heart. I'm not my liver. I'm not my stomach. I have those, but I am not those. Now, there are some people that would argue with me. I could guarantee you that. They would say, oh, no, you are your brain. My experience in my life is I'm not my brain. I can change my brain. And if I can change my brain, then I can change myself. And that's what the new neuroscience is really about, is how this early learning process. So we have to develop category. The brain does, in order to orient itself in space and time. One of the hardest things about change is we don't have typically a pattern for the change that we want to make. Like, I want to go play pickleball, let's say. Okay, so that means I need to learn how to do all this. Initially, it's awkward because my brain doesn't have a pattern for pickleball. It's got to learn the rules and learn how to hit and all that kind of stuff. But after it develops those patterns, I play pickleball. I don't, by the way, but I've had fantasy. That kind of thing is using a fork. All these things, the brain has to acquire knowledge in order to function in the world. And if you do a change, and it's disorienting. That's why oftentimes we avoid it, because when patterns disintegrate, I'm moving to a new city, I'm getting a new job, I'm getting married, I'm having a kid. Boy, talk about my life patterns disintegrating, and I have to develop new patterns. We actually can do that intentionally, what I call, we can create memories of the future. We're doing it all the time anyway. We can do it intentionally. We can create a memory of, how's it going to be with my child, 6-month-old? How am I going to do that? I can imagine and start to create memories of how I want to be and how it's going to work. And I can live into those memories by remembering them. But I have to be very intentional. That eases the transition and change. Yeah, the brain's amazing. Amazing, But you're not your brain. I'm not my brain. I can do something with I can change my brain. I can change it.
Mm. One of the things I see prominent, especially in the middle generation or Gen Z, they're what, 18 to 25 or something along these lines, maybe even up towards to 30, right?
Nope, 30. Yeah.
Where,
18.
where, yeah, like in that ballpark,
Yeah. Yeah.
where we start to look at some of the things you said, right? The brain, the self. And then I wanted to add one more piece to the puzzle: identity, where people feel as if they are not happy with themselves, right? They are in this constant state of comparing, which is understandable because we live in a very open world today with all of our social medias, where we can see the likes, we can see the dislikes, we can see how many people comment, we can have so many followers. And that right there, can be very difficult for someone who sees that as, this is what I need, or this is going to make me happy. And some of these individuals, they get so depressed or so down about it, where they feel as if, all right, well, I'm depressed all of a sudden. Like, they're just super sad about this idea of that they don't have enough followers, or they don't have, enough notoriety, because they wanted to be a streamer or a podcaster, and they're doing all of this work, but yet they're just not making any headway toward that goal. They might have a friend who was successful, and they're like, well, I can do it too. I'm smarter than that individual. So it's like this constant battle with themselves, or the brain, or the self, and they are questioning their identity. because the world will tell you who you should be. And it's more difficult to combat what the world is saying, especially if you want to be relevant, if you wanted to stay up to date with all the trends. You can just think about it, right? There's so many TikTok dances, there's so many trends. I don't do any of them, right? Whatever. I have an assistant who does all the social media stuff and everything. She can follow whatever is popular. I don't have the time for it, but yet there's so many people who immerse themselves in it, and they find themselves lost. So when someone is going down this path of trying to fit in, but at the end of the day, they sacrifice their true identity or their true self, what is the remedy for that? Is it to turn off our phones, throw away our technologies, and say, okay, let me go live in the mountains for a bit?
That's a great question, and I'm gonna choose two words that you used: fit in. As a species, as mammals, fitting in and belonging is one of the primary things in our emotional brain. We want to know we belong, that we matter, that we have a place. And but many of us, if not, I would say all of us, that's kind of universal. I'll say most of us, in our early experiences, the first 7 years, the experience, even we had loving parents, there are going to be times when they don't have time for us. There are going to be times when we feel ignored. There are going to be times when we feel, and you're talking about the experience of significance. I matter. And during those times, and if we go look back of the past 20 or 30 years, parenting has been a real challenge. But especially with social media. And I know from my own kids being in grade school, when they were in grade school, just the competition to matter. And so what happens is the brain learns, let's say, for example, and let's take someone who does do that. The brain learns that not mattering is a threat. Now, what kind of threat is that? I've worked with many, many people who very clearly, when we get to the unconscious learning, the emotional learning, that third level, they'll say something like, if I disappoint significant people, they will shame me and I will be rejected. I will end up like a child all alone. Now, this is a 35-year-old, 25-year-old, 50-year-old man or woman, and that makes no sense. But it does as a feeling because it's something they felt. And so what we have, I believe what we're seeing is the comparison. And there's always somebody who's going to be better than, more than, have this than. There's always going to be. Boy, if you want to make comparisons, social media, because it thrives on fear. Capitalism thrives on fear. It needs fear and selling significance, selling, hey, this is the car you need. You need to wear these clothes because if you don't, then you're not important. The message is subtle and the message is powerful. And so it touches into our deep early learnings. And that's the cause. The cause is the deep early. I'll blame social media, but they're just capitalizing on the fear, these early emotional learnings that tell me. And I know from my own personal life experience, because of my early learnings, shame and incompetence. Why else would I get 3 master's degrees? When I look back at it, I realized I wanted to prove, look at me, I got my act together. But the reality was inside, I was quaking inside because of my family of origin and the shame and my sense of I'm not good enough. I don't measure up to my friends that had more than I had because of our status in the neighborhood. When I touched into those learnings and was able to get in touch with what's really going on here and the unconscious and bring it to my consciousness and actually update that learning, update it. And that changes the brain. That changes the brain at the synaptic level. Now and then, do I compare? Sure. But I go, I know that part of me. I know him. That's my adaptive self. Just scared, fearful I won't belong. But hey, if I look around, I look at friends, I look at people, I look at my family, I belong. I matter to people. So I can create, and I'll talk about this in a little bit, instead of a threat prediction that my brain makes when I make a comparison, because that's a threat prediction, that instead I can feel the threat prediction and go and remember, now, wait a minute. What's the real truth here? Not what feels true, I'm not enough, but what the real truth is. Hey, I've done a lot. People like me. I like people. I've got friends. Hey, wow. And put those together like Bluetooth. The brain's predicting this. You don't belong. You don't have a place. And I go, wait a minute, I do. And the brain goes, huh, wait a minute. Because of its evolutionary survival bias, it updates itself. And that's the miracle of the new neuroscience. That's the miracle of it. And when I say miracle, I really mean it's amazing. It's a miracle.
Yeah, the brain is definitely adaptive. And I think people think, like once they get set in stone a certain age or something, they're like, okay, this is it. Right. You can't teach an old dog new tricks, right? So I'm just gonna keep on going down my path. I'm gonna work my 9 to 5. I'm not gonna change. I'm gonna stay in my lane.
That's called a fixed mindset. That's called a very fixed mindset.
Exactly, exactly. But we live in a fixed mindset world. They can see the growth, right? They envision it. They say, oh, this would be nice to have. But then again, they don't do the things necessary to get there. I picked one word out of all the things you said, and it's going to lead to a question you probably haven't been asked before, or maybe haven't been asked recently. And the word is prediction, where we can look back at anything, right? We could look at Walmart, we could look at Amazon, we could look at energy drinks, we could look at Zoom, all these companies that have started from, just like a startup company. And now they're these big Fortune 500 companies worth billions of dollars, where we can look back today and say, I should have bought some stock in that.
I wish I
Google, I should have bought some stock in that, right? So we can look back.
when it was 70 cents.
Exactly. We can look back and say, "Oh, it was common sense to us because that was such a good thing to do." Yet it's like we can't predict what is to come, even though when we are in the future, we can say, "Oh, that would have been so good. I I thought of that idea. I was thinking about purchasing, but I didn't do it." When I start to think of just this idea, the generations in the future, right? When they start to look at us, right? They start to look at the boomers, they start to look at the millennials, they start to look at the Gen Z and the Gen Alphas, right? They're going to see all of the problems that we were dealing with or going through, and they're going to say, the solution is simple because they have the solution now, right? Because they have already lived it, they saw it, they saw that it came to fruition. Now, when I say this, right? We don't necessarily have crystal balls. We really can't, say, okay, this is going to be what the future is. Now, we can use some logic saying, okay, if you stop eating cheeseburgers and hot dogs and you go to the gym and you make sure you watch your calorie intake and you do right for what's your body, you're going to be in shape, right? We can look at that aspect, right? But when it comes to this idea of how the brain is forming, sometimes it's going to be difficult when the brain is forming. Think of what you said, the adaptive self, but let's use the word ego. When you're a teenager, you're like, I know everything. But then again, you look back when you're in your 30s or 40s or 50s and you say, man, I was a dumb teen. I was a dumb teen. So now we can start to look at that. And I understand that there's an aspect of, when we're younger, we're trying to protect ourselves, we're trying to fit in, because to be outcasted is similar to a death sentence when you're a teenager. You don't want that. So we will withdraw from our true self or being this outgoing individual. We will hide our flaws with makeup or this idea of being a jock in sports or something like that. But we truly don't express ourselves, or we truly don't tell people, what's going on the inside, right? We can get down to the roots, but most of the time people, they live on that surface level. And when they live on that surface level and they only show people what's on the surface, they don't necessarily know what's underneath. And if you think about it, let's say you were going to build a home and you didn't pay attention to what was underneath your home, right? You didn't do any blueprinting or geographing. You just said, okay, I'm going to build my home. And literally there's a sinkhole under your house and you're building upon it, right? You think you're going to build your dream house. And all of a sudden, in a couple years, your house is gone. And all of this is to say, can we get down to the root cause today rather than looking into the future or being in the future and looking back and saying, it's easy for me to see that now, because sometimes we're blindsided or we have our blind spots and we can't see the root cause because we are, again, on that surface level. We are covering up everything. Think of it as a protective membrane or something along
Yeah,
those lines.
I think that's a good term, protective membrane. Yeah.
And so, this idea of we are protecting ourselves to a certain degree, but we are missing out on what's in the center.
Yeah, very much so. So when I use the term prediction, there are two kinds of, the brain is always predicting. It's a learning, predicting, and adapting process. We're always predicting. This show, you predicted, I'll do this, I'll set this up, and we communicated back and forth. When you want to learn something new, you do it because you're predicting something. Oh, if I learn how to play pickleball, I'll be with my friends and have fun. If I learn how to make a lasagna, I'll have my. I got to go to the grocery store. Even that is the act of prediction. That's conscious. Now, it doesn't mean we're always conscious of predicting, but everything we do is a function of a prediction. Now, the conscious prediction, I'm going to go to school and become this. Or I look back and say, gee, I wish Amazon's in Seattle. Why didn't I see this? I should have bought it. I'd be a multi-gazillionaire now. I was predicting. My brain wasn't focused on that prediction at all. It wasn't focused on, let me think about this. It was caught up in a lot of other things. Then there's the unconscious prediction. The unconscious prediction, based on learnings that we acquired when we're young and still get activated in the present. May I give you a short story as an example? Okay. Here's an example of an emotion. I mentioned earlier, my shame and competence because of my family of origin stuff, and it's all that kind of stuff. So nothing unique about that experience. I wrote 2 books in the 90s, and they did well. Reclaiming Yourself and Your Boss Is Not Your Mother. So Your Boss Is Not Your Mother, interesting book about families and how we replicate our family. When I gave it to the publisher, it was a big New York publishing house. When I gave it to them, they said, great content, format doesn't work. We have to have it rewritten. And their thinking was really good. I understood it completely. Made total sense. Complete sense. They hired a professional writer. During the writing process, Michael, I felt just like I felt as a kid, ashamed of myself, inadequate. What's wrong with me? Incompetent. I had a lot of toxic feelings. I hid them all. And it was never the intent of the publisher or the professional writer to have me feel that way. I just felt that way. I didn't realize what was my emotional brain was learning. So about 2004, 2003, right in there, I had an idea for 2 more books. And I sat down to write, and I couldn't write. I had an idea, I couldn't write. Every time I sat down, I'd get anxious. And it was like, what is wrong with me? What is wrong? Procrastination was my protective mechanism. And it took me 10 years. 10 years of toxic procrastination. I bought a beautiful pen, and I did a writing retreat, and I had a writing coach, and I did therapy, and I must have brought 3 new fancy computers. And I thought, oh man, this will solve the problem. I couldn't write, Michael. I couldn't write. And I came down hard on myself. I didn't realize in 2015, when I learned about emotional learning and my brain's adaptive mechanism, my brain had learned writing, and these negative feelings became associated in my emotional brain, actually in the subcortical regions of emotion. And it built upon my earlier experiences of shame and incompetence and all that kind of stuff as a child. So every time I went to write, my brain would recognize the stimulus. Oh, you want to write? No, we're not going to let you write, because writing and shame and incompetence and negative feelings, because of its survival bias, it would generate anxiety, and I'd withdraw, procrastinate. I didn't know that was happening for 10 years. When I was able to get some training and I was a guinea pig for to go through a process. I was in New York for a weekend learning about memory reconsolidation and emotional learning. When I flew back to Seattle Monday morning. I started writing. I had a little bit of anxiety, and I thought, this is weird. I'm supposed to be anxious, and I'm not anxious. It's because my brain had been updated from what it learned. It now had been updated. I was able, because it predicted, if you write another book, and I've got that in my book, if you write another book, you'll be shamed, humiliated, and rejected, just like you were as a child. My solution to this is to avoid writing, get anxious, and procrastinate, so I never have to experience those feelings. When I got a hold of that and I was able to create a prediction correction and kind of a Bluetooth matching, as I mentioned, put those together, my brain updated itself. I didn't need to procrastinate anymore because the threat was gone. It no longer existed in my brain. So because the brain is always bringing, and so all the symptoms and problems that we talk about are the vast majority. Even depression can be a protective mechanism. And I've worked with many people where depression was their protective mechanism. They weren't aware of it. Taking medications relieved them a little bit, but no change happened. And that's very few. I want people to know emotional learning and prediction. The brain is a prediction machine. And the research on that is very, very clear. And we can update our predictions based on what we learned that we didn't know we learned that is now interfering with our life. Even though it feels true. It felt true to me that if I write a book, I'll be rejected. That felt true. It wasn't true. I knew that here. But in my body, it was like, put your foot on the gas to go in the car and your other foot goes on the brake. It's hard on the engine. And that's what I was doing. I want to write. Oh, no, you don't. You could not write. Bingo, right there.
Yeah. There's a lot of conflict.
Yeah.
But this is not just you. This is a lot of stories for many individuals.
This is the human condition. And when I look at the world today, what I'm seeing is all these protective mechanisms, like you talk about the Gen Z, that needing, that comparing, this is all threat-based. It is threat-based behavior. Otherwise, I don't belong. Like you said, and what you referred to, how important it is to belong, to feel like I matter, I'm part of something. The threat, that is a huge, as you said, that is an existential threat of death. And so, understandably, we will work hard to belong, but we'll never change the threat. No matter what we do, we won't belong because you have to change the learning that is the cause of the problem, not the problem.
Yeah. And I think that's a perfect segue, the word threat, to now look at your book, right? Your newest book, Living a Trigger-Free Life.
Yes.
Trigger. It could be a negative word for some people, right? Like, what is a trigger for? It could be for a firearm, weapon. And people can start to now look in the mindset of what trigger can mean, the response to.
It's the response.
And
Yeah.
when we look at response in action, right? If someone was to do something to you, you would respond, but it would happen after the action already occurred. So if I was going to punch you, one of the stimuli that you will have is that you might flinch, you might close your eyes, or maybe you might strengthen your body and get ready to fight. So there's a couple of things that can happen.
Yeah.
But
in a split second. Exactly.
what you have to understand is that my punch, if I did not argue, if I didn't yell, and it was just coming out of nowhere, you couldn't respond to it quick enough, right? Because my action was going to be greater than your response initially. Now, not saying that my punch would knock you out and then that you wouldn't be able to fight back, but most people are living in this response-based world where the world is just knocking them, and they are responding to what the world is doing. So this is why everyone is so late. This is why everyone is on the end of the tracks versus right in the front. And they're like, okay, well, why am I not forward? And it's because we're just responding to everything.
Right.
It could be a trend. It could be, again, something happens in the relationship. Think of it this way, right? Let's say your partner is like, oh, I'm not happy in the relationship. And he's like, oh, well, I'm gonna make you happy, right?
Right,
So,
right. Remember I got it.
so
Yeah.
they said something, you're responding to it versus why were you not doing what the relationship needed all along? So this can be true for every aspect. It's not just relationships, it could be career, life,
Here.
whatever, your advancement. Most people, they just wait until the threat is so real. Procrastination, is the idea or the fear of putting off something until the fear of not doing it is greater than the fear of doing it. So this idea of threat is so prominent in our mind, talking about negativity, talking about this. And I can imagine that living a trigger-free life would be the solution to many, but I would feel as if most people will have a hard time releasing that trigger.
That's a really good question. In the book, people ask me, "Are you living a trigger-free life now, Brian?" And my answer is no, because I'm a human being with a lot of triggers, a lot of learnings inside of me, but I'm living a life in which I'm aware of when I get negatively activated by something my wife says, something I see on the news. I'm at a party and I feel like, hey, you guys, you didn't include me. Whatever the stimulus is that activates this little spike in energy, this negative reaction, I'm getting triggered at that point in time. In the sense that it's touching into a little trauma. It's interesting, the word trigger actually means a lever that somebody pulls, but it came out of the research after World War I from soldiers coming back having what they call battle fatigue or soldier's heart. It was PT. We all have trauma. All of us do. Not all of us have PTSD, but we all have trauma because we live in a very, as you say, reactive world. It's people react. Recognizing what happens all of a sudden, the typical response, the brain's response is to push it away, push the source away, conflict, blame, criticism, ultimately physical violence, withdraw and avoid, pull in, don't say anything, what is called fawning, which is placating and accommodating, or completely avoiding the stimulus. If you punch me, the probability that I'm going to want to be with you in the future is probably nil, because my brain has learned this dude, I'm not safe. I don't know when he's going to do it again. Unless there's another part of me that says, well, wait, I don't want to be abandoned. So I am going to go back and have the friendship because the threat of abandonment is so much more painful, not something I'm conscious of. So when I talk about triggers, then I'm in here living a trigger-free life is recognizing that every reaction you have, other than if somebody holds a gun to your head, I mean, that's a whole different ballgame. When you're in a physical, your body's going to respond or with fight or flight. Most of us don't live in those circumstances, thank God. But we have the same reactions, and it's hard on the body. It wears it. It's inflammation. I mean, the chronic issues that happen as a result of that. So if we look at our triggers, become aware of I call it trigger-informed mindfulness, being mindful of my triggers. A trigger is a sign. When you get triggered, it's a sign that your brain has perceived a threat. And it's predicting pain and suffering at that point in time. It's just like that. That's what's happening. And if you can, it's interesting. I mean, many years ago, before I learned all this, my wife is a great cook, for example, and I'd be like to help her. But sometimes she would say, hey, you cut the onions wrong. Here's how you do it. And I would take it as like, she's telling me I'm dumb and stupid and incompetent. I would feel triggered. What? She's just telling me to cut the onions right for dinner. That's all. But me, I had this reaction like I was being judged. And I would go silent or I'd get a little sarcastic back. When I began to recognize what a trigger was, then that I was getting triggered. No. And I got in touch with the threat. If my wife isn't happy with me, if what I do is not perfect, then I will be rejected. She will not love me anymore. That's crazy. But it felt true. It felt true because I learned that a long time ago. And it just gets triggered. If we can get in touch with those threats and see the vast majority have no basis in reality, but they do feel true because the emotional brain which does not know time. My thinking brain knows it's the past. My emotional brain, it doesn't know time. It's happening right here and now, even though it happened 40 years ago or 50 years ago. It's like, what? That's how it works. All of us know those feelings that stop us from touching into and being authentic, courageous, open, expressive, and so much creativity, I believe, is blocked, Michael, as a result. So much courage is blocked. So much energy is blocked by that emotional learning that says, you're not good enough. People are going to laugh at you. I could go on, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, definitely. And I can imagine how important this book is in the world that we're living in today because we have responded for so long that it just feels normal now.
Exactly.
Where it's just like, okay, this is what I'm supposed to do. I always tell people like, if you could live a life to your fullest potential, what would that look like? And they're like, I don't like they have no clue. They have no clue what they're capable of. They
No,
just see
and
what's around them.
it's scary to even think about.
Hmm.
Little story. You talked earlier about, I want to lose weight. I want to feel good. So, great. Okay. So I worked once with a doctor who he really wanted to be more attractive to women. He had a weight problem. So we did some work and he would like to, he'd exercise and he'd eat healthy. And after about 6 months, he's down to this really nice weight. And women started getting attracted to him. And he would sabotage and go back and start eating junk food and gained about 50. And he had this cycle and he would keep going this cycle for several years. What we uncovered was when he was a little boy, his mother was borderline personality disorder. She consumed him. She engulfed him. She was an engulfing process. He was like a surrogate husband, emotional. So he learned that if women are attracted to me, then I will be engulfed and I will lose myself. He didn't realize it. So every time women were attracted to him, the brain perceived a threat. I'm going to lose myself. And therefore he went back and indulged himself and got to the point where women aren't attracted to him. Now, we might say, you need to go to weight watch, you need to do all these things. No, the cause is the threat that he will be engulfed. One of the 5 primary threats that children experience is being engulfed, taken over, losing yourself. So it's fascinating stuff when you really start looking at it and start realizing how we can free ourselves from the tyranny of the past.
Yeah, and I was reminded when you were speaking of a UFC fighter, where because the word sabotage was kind of ringing in my mind,
Mm-hmm.
where he would do things that were not conducive to maybe being a champion because he is a champion.
Right.
Like he like hands down, so many martial arts. He's a dangerous man,
Yeah.
and
I can imagine.
he would say before his fights that he would like the night before he would get super drunk, and he did that not because he was an alcoholic, but because he needed an excuse if he lost.
Oh my,
If I lose, it was because I went out and I drank too much and I wasn't in my top shape. Even though he is still today a phenomenal fighter,
isn't that
and
interesting?
it was just this idea of how he had to get over a loss if he did have one. It
The
was
threat
like
of losing meant so much to him. Just in case, he gave himself an excuse so he wouldn't have to deal with the feel of being a loser.
exactly
Wow.
very
A lot of
interesting,
sense to me.
and I can't imagine how many people are doing things similar. They don't want to start up a show, a podcast, or they don't want to write that book, or they don't want to put out their resumes or whatever it be.
Right.
They're living within the comfort zone. They're living in the parameter of what will keep them safe. And I understand this, but
Yeah,
then,
that's a good way to
you
put
know,
it. The parameter of what keeps them safe.
yeah. And, there's just so much more to life. And our conversation today is definitely just the tippy top, or like it's the top of the iceberg, tip of the iceberg, where the brain is so vast and how we operate and how we think. I mean, just from speaking with you, like your clients, I'm sure even that would learn so much about themselves, because if you are thinking in your mind, like, I know this, I can do this, great, right? I'm not saying that you should belittle anything that you are, that you have accomplished, but there's just so much more about you that you don't know yet.
Oh,
We have,
amen to that one.
I'm
Yeah,
still learning today.
man,
We all have
I'm
blind
a few
spots.
years older than you.
Must be like this too, right? You must be in
Yeah.
your 40s.
Oh, yeah, you're right, right. A little
Exactly,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
To be young is an
yeah, yeah,
to be young is a mindset for sure. So as we begin to, like wrap up and everything, I'm gonna get some final words and some final thoughts because I know you want to, leave us with something big. Please tell everyone something that they can walk away with today, whether it be from your book or just something you've learned in life that would really help them. And then after you do that, please tell everyone how they can reach out to you, find you, and then if they wanted to begin working with you.
sure. We've all had to adapt to the human experience, and early in that adaptive process, I say the adaptive self. Those memories of that adaptive self get in the way of our real self, what you call the true self, the authentic self. And I encourage people, if they can go back and just remember a few times when they really felt like themselves, maybe somebody really saw them, or they really engaged in a conversation, the person came and said, "Thank you, you had such a positive impact on my life," or "Thank you." And allowing maybe compliments to come in, but remembering who you are, not who you learned you are, but who you really are. And I could go spiritual on this because I'm a firm follower of Pierre Chardin. He was a Jesuit paleontologist. And he once said, "We are not human beings having a spiritual experience. We're spiritual beings having a human experience. Loss, pain, hope, joy, to all of that. But underneath that is this really true, authentic self that is just wants to express in love, in creativity, in connection, in deep, deep connection." And I encourage people, remember who you are. You're not who you learned you are. Remember who you are. Remember who you are. People, I go to my website. The book is available on Amazon or at your local bookstore. You can order it there. It's in digital and print format. Yeah.
What's the name of your website?
BrianDesRoches.com. Yeah.
All
Yeah.
right, perfect. I always like to have it verbally as well because some people don't read the description.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you have the website there, but if you are a person who's interested, right, the link is right down below. You don't have to worry about spelling. You don't have to worry about typing it. You just have to click a button, right? I can't make it any easier for you.
Yeah. Yeah. That's very sweet.
So
Thank you.
learn about yourself. Don't be afraid of who you can become. I know sometimes the journey can be daunting when you have to maybe, climb this mountain in front of you, right? With all these problems and all of these, skills that you might have to learn or adjustments you have to make. That journey right there is going to be something that's going to elevate you. This idea of elevating yourself to learn more about what you can accomplish, right? To challenge yourself, maybe even past your comfort zone because I am a person who has been living in a world where I have been pushing myself, but I haven't always been that way. I've been a person who has also coasted. I got my 9 to 5, I'm just doing this and I come home and I watch the movies, play with my dog. But then I was like, wait, I'm missing something. And something felt like it was off, it was wrong. And if you feel as if something is off or wrong with your life, do not hesitate, right? Whether you are living a life full of triggers or you are allowing your brain to dictate what your future is for yourself. And if it's not positive, then start to rethink what you need to do, recalibrate, right? A wonderful conversation. I know you're going to say something, so I'm going to let you say it. And of course, we're going to be wrapping up.
The cave you fear to enter holds the treasure that you seek.
Say that again.
The cave you fear to enter holds the treasure that you seek.
Mm.
That's what you've been going through. That's, Michael, as you just described. There was a cave. Life is good, but you decided to enter. And now you're exploring the treasure, expanding the treasure.
Yeah. It's also the aspect of when you feel the most fear, that is when you should be jumping.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Oh boy, it's the greatest sign.
Hmm.
It is like, oh yeah, there is, boom, there's the cave, there's the treasure.
Yeah. That's where life begins, at the edge of the cliff.
Yeah.
And I can attest to that. I'll tell you this quick story, and then I'm going to say my goodbye. There's a place in Connecticut called Brownstone Park quarry that was filled with water,
Hmm.
and they have these cliff jumps, and it's so funny because when you're on the bottom, like you're on the pier, and you're on a dock, and you're looking up to the cliff. I don't know how many feet it is, but it doesn't look bad, right? You're just like on the bottom. Oh, this is easy. But the moment you get to that edge,
Mm.
it's a different story, right? And you have all of these thoughts in your mind saying, like, run away. This is not common sense. What are you thinking? And you
Yeah,
just have to take a deep breath and count to three or count down from three and just leap. And during that fall, you're not worried about that cliff. You're not worried about anything. You're just in that moment, right? So there are so many moments to be had in life. And
that's a
our
great,
moment today,
that's a beautiful.
yeah. And our moment today is definitely one to be remembered. And I do want to thank you, Brian, for coming on, spending some time, and of course, talking about your life, your works, and your moments.
Thank you. Thank you, Michael. I really appreciate it. I deeply, deeply appreciate it. Loved your questions. Loved your questions. Really. Thank you.